Now start recording. Here we go. Welcome everybody to Trio Boston. We haven't done this for a while and very excited to be back and along with my partners.
Hello.
This is Anson.
Hi, how are you? I'm Summer.
Hi, I'm Yuki.
So today I am beyond grateful and beyond excited. So we have this special guest join us today. So he is a highly successful business owner, a renowned trainer, a certified international The One Thing instructor, a business coach at RealAnson.
That's correct.
Right. He is also a merger and acquisition consultant that helped facilitate hundreds of transactions in many industries and companies. He's also an operating partner at Keller Williams Realty. He is also the founding partner of the Market Center in Bedford, Manchester, New Hampshire area. And so him and his partner found KW Metropolitan, started in 2005. And since then, the brokerage just has grown to have over 530 agents and transact real estate in 4 states in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont. So, you know, this resume is just insane.
Impressive.
It's insane. And it's one of the dreams for many of us in the industry. So we welcome our coach, our team coach, and our lovely, highly respected friend, Alan Rice.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming and
All right.
Yeah, some
Yes.
dance move.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us, Alan. This is, I think we talked about this for a while, like to having you to join us to talk about podcasts. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to hear from you. And I think our audience will be very excited to hear about your career, to hear about your story. And obviously, we're going to cover like what's happening in the real estate market nowadays. And then, you know, what's next, right? What's in the future. So
A lot of things to talk
yeah.
about today.
So this will be about 7 hours of...
We'll take it easy. We'll take it
You
easy.
stay here.
I got a bedroom for you this day. So we understand that you have an extensive resume and a comprehensive experience in a variety of industries. But what caught my attention the most is your early years working as the director of special services in the name is Vannacunet School District in Hampton, New Hampshire for a few years. And then you went on to become the CEO of a private nonprofit agency at Developmental Services of Stratford County. So can you tell us a little bit about the journey and how that experience helped you to advance into the latter career in construction and real estate?
Sure. And thanks. I really enjoyed spending time with you, obviously, but I'm really glad to be here this morning as well and be able to talk to your audience. So yeah, I started off as a special education teacher, and when the whole special education effort really started to gain traction. And I jokingly, but not really too jokingly, tell people it was really that training and that experience that put me in a position to really focus on my ability to communicate with folks, to communicate with people. I taught at the high school level in special needs, high school age kids, which were not easy. But it really gave me the opportunity to think on my feet, to really incorporate the power of questions and to really, communicate directly with folks who were struggling with issues back then. And so what I say is, that's what probably qualifies me to be an owner of a real estate company is my special needs training. But, that's why I say somewhat jokingly, but really not, because I'm able to apply those concepts of communication, understanding what people are looking for, saying, I call it needs analysis. And even in the sales world, that's really what we do. We meet with consumers, we help them identify, crystallize their needs, And so that was important training for me then. And then after being in the public school, I moved in. I got my master's degree, and the state of New Hampshire was being sued for their treatment of adults, and because all developmentally impaired adults were in an institution, and so the state was required to deinstitutionalize those folks, and that's where I learned a lot about real estate. I am from a real estate family. My mom was owned a real estate company. She was on the Real Estate Commission in Maine. My dad, but what really got me going was working for this agency. We were developing work programs and housing for developmentally impaired individuals who have been in an institution from anywhere from 10 to 60 years. And so that gave me the opportunity to buy homes, renovate them to accommodate folks who had mobility limitations sometimes. And we were in a position back then, it probably doesn't sound like a big number today, but it was then. We deinstitutionalized over 83 people over the course of 3 years, and reunited them with the community, and also put them in a position where they were higher opportunities matched to their abilities, but higher opportunities to contribute to the community as well. Absolutely. So I'm proud of that in terms of having that kind of an impact. It really got me going on real estate. And as I said earlier, my mom was in real estate, and so it was really through her influence that she said, if you love doing what you're doing with real estate, you should look into doing real estate, and so that's what I did.
So why special education at the very beginning? Like, especially when you're coming from a real estate background, right? Like, your parents does this for a living.
Yeah.
And why? Like, why not real estate first?
Yeah, great question. I think back then, of course, this was way before any of you were born. It was just after the Civil War.
Oh my God.
And I think back then, I really wanted to make an impact on kids and schools and so forth. And so that's really, and actually there was a little bit of tension at most Thanksgivings while I was still in education, because my parents were like, wanting me to get into real estate, and I was committed to the education thing. And so I think that was, when I graduated from college, it was 1975. And
right.
Yeah.
And you went on study too.
Yes, yep. And there were colleges back then in 1975 all over the country, but
all over the world.
All over the world.
Yes.
So I think it was that commitment to what I'm going to call a greater good, or at least my perspective or perception of what would be a greater good. And those folks tended to be underserved. A lot of time, the paradox that troubled me the most is that school systems, because their inability to deal with kids who had difficulties, learning difficulties, and consequently behavior difficulties, the solution was throw them out.
Oh.
And so, I would say to the school board and the principals and superintendent, we're solving what I'm going to call immediate problem, perhaps, because we don't have to deal with the behaviors and so forth. But these folks still live in the community. I mean, we're bumping into them at Market Basket, and
right.
we're seeing them at events and so forth. So throwing them out really isn't a long-term solution.
They're still doing the same thing, right? Like, there's schools still throwing out kids.
Yeah, and it's it's just, to me, it's just a philosophical difference that I had with the approach, and that's why we developed programs at the high school level to it wasn't just for kids with what I'm going to call developmental impairments, like mental retardation and cerebral palsy, that kind of thing, but also people with behavioral difficulties. And that way we were able to keep them in school and, provide that mentoring and having a change on their outlook and consequently their behavior.
Right. Wow. That's phenomenal.
Have you talked
meaningful.
to some of the students afterwards?
Yeah, I have not recently, but I have had contact with folks over the course of time. There's still a couple of young adults, or maybe even a little bit older adults, but who will communicate with me, and I'll reach out to them. And it's nice to reflect on the fact that we work together really, and they were able to do some things that perhaps they wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't provide those kind of services.
Yeah, so with your help.
Yeah,
that's rewarding.
It really was, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And also, you could leverage your education background to the real estate. So that's why you are who you are today.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point in terms of that correlation, Yuki, and that, and that's why I say even in business, whether it's real estate or whatever, it really is a needs analysis arrangement or relationship. And when my first boss in real estate said, you should really do teaching because teaching kind of flows with you, and it would be helpful to our company. And so I did always have done a lot of teaching or presentations, workshops for real estate and in real estate. And I've come to the feeling or thought that if you can explain it, then you really know it. And if you can't explain it, then, no judgment, but you probably just don't really know it to that degree. And so what I've always said to folks is, if you're interested in doing stuff in whatever your industry and teaching, pick a topic that you know really well. And then pick a topic that you don't know so well. And if you put yourself in the position to, quote, teach, then you come to know the topic that you don't know quite as well a lot better. Because if you're going to explain it to folks, you have to know it backwards, forwards, upside down, every which way. So it has been an avenue that has been a great combination for me. So it wasn't like, I left teaching and I never taught again.
He's still teaching.
Yeah.
He's still teaching us every week.
Yeah. So nice. And really the approach that I prefer is we call it teaching, but it really is consulting. It's really back and forth communication and, again, needs analysis and the power of questions, because that's what helps people to crystallize their own thinking and make behavior changes.
Right.
Yeah, I can feel your passion every time you're coaching us.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
And that's a good way. Maybe next time we three, we can question each other.
Yeah.
Ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, questions are powerful.
Yep.
So after the developmental services career, you transit into real estate.
Correct.
The one common career path in real estate is that most people would start as an agent to learn the aspects of rentals and then go into sales and then become a broker and then, eventually the final stage of the career mostly transits into development, right? But you did the quite opposite. You start from construction, then transit into sales. In addition, you did commercial real estate first, eventually become the all-around player. You oversees everything, like residential, commercial, new construction, even relocation services. So this is quite a turnaround in a short 5 years. So what motivated you and inspired you to become a business mogul in real estate? And you were like the Ryan Serhant before the Ryan Serhant nowadays.
Don't tell him that. Well, it was an interesting path because the owner of the company that I ended up going to work for in real estate really took a chance with me, and it was a two-way chance. And so he encouraged me to look at working with developers as a way to start my career. And so he put me in charge of what was then, we called it the New Homes Group. So it was in late mid 80s, and it was really taking off, particularly in southern New Hampshire. Condos, we couldn't even spell condo back then because we didn't know about it that much. So it was really on the front end of condos as well as single family homes. And the way he explained it to me was, you're just like all the other agents in terms of where your focus is. I just need you to list subdivisions and condo developments, and then develop a program so that we can market them, because it is different than what I'm going to call the individual home or individual condo. And that intrigued me. I loved the thoughts of it. And so, we, at the time that I started with the company, we had one subdivision of like 32 homes. And we were somewhat regarded as on the forefront of it. When you think about it, one subdivision of 32 homes. My first project that I landed was a condo project in Hooksett, New Hampshire. And the overall plan was 385 condos. And that was like, wow. Literally unheard of at that point in time.
Program.
Yeah.
Huge project.
Yeah. And so the fun part was now once you secure the project, it's hiring a on-site sales team, which is again a little bit different than the individual home kind of approach. And there were a lot of things put in place so that making the buyer's selection process really smooth, so that there was great communication between what they wanted and what actually got built, because everything was to be built. Those condos weren't sitting there already done. And so it really was a fun kind of thing. We would have weekly development meetings and talk about pricing strategies and all kinds of stuff. And I was also able to have the fortune of a lot of great salespeople who wanted to have that kind of experience. It was office hours. I mean, you were there from X to X every day or 5 days a week. So a lot different than what a real estate agent has for schedule these days.
How was the sales approach back then when you're selling condos versus today? Because today you have to do a lot of online marketing, and especially ever since, we're going to get into that a little later, especially that nowadays it's kind of tough for the condo market ever since COVID happened. And
yeah.
How was it back then, when you doing the sales approach?
Well, it was very different, and remember, we're talking about the late 80s, so Al Gore had not invented the internet quite yet, so there was not a lot of what we call online or internet initiative. So it was very, I'm going to call it paper. I mean, we spent a lot of money with newspaper ads, and there are still a couple of newspapers around, but it's definitely, we recognize that difference. So, it was very paper. It was newspaper ads, obviously open houses or office hours at the different projects, and events were big. So grand openings, when a new phase opened up, because oftentimes, the properties or the condos or the homes would sell in an initial phase, and now a different phase is opening up. And of course, the developer would improve and make changes, design changes in phases as well. And so that enabled us to really promote that. And so we'd always have what I'd call a grand open house at the beginning, and then there were phase not open houses, but grand openings. And so it was much more what I'm going to call, human contact, a lot of paper. When I think about the money in brochures with all the different designs and color selections, and so forth. But that's the way we communicated with the consumer, and that's what the consumer expected.
Was the washer dryer a big thing back in the day? Like, because nowadays nobody would want to buy a condo without unit washer dryer.
Oh yeah, washer dryers. I mean, decks. And you say, well, what's the big deal about decks? Well, in condominium ownership, people, it's limited common area and how the whole maintenance thing works and so forth. It was a learning experience for all of us, consumers included. And but yeah, a lot of it had to do with those features, definitely.
So when the developer changing faces, do they listen to your feedbacks?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is they listen.
But they don't do it.
Well, and that's where I do make the analogy even until today's market, and that is, we've got to demonstrate as professionals, we've got to demonstrate our market knowledge. And market knowledge isn't just what is sold, what has happened in the past. It's understanding the consumer. It's understanding the buyer and the buyer desires. And then we provide those recommendations to the developer or the seller in today's market. And we've got to do that in a way so that they, trust our opinion or our perspective. They know that we're engaged. They know that we understand some of the market indicators and particularly what the consumer wants. And so we have to build that trust so that they feel confident and they're willing to take action. And so, we would, in those weekly development meetings, we would provide recommendations, and some of which were executed and some of which weren't. And then oftentimes later on, they were. And so not that we were perfect or we got it right every time, but when you talk with people, the buyers, and you're really communicating and listening to them, you do get a sense of what they are looking for so you can make those changes.
Yeah. So it also depends if the developer is a spec-based
Right.
developer or is a customized developer.
Correct.
Giving that volume, I assume, is a spec-based.
Yeah. But of course, what we were trying to do, the delicate dance between being, when we say spec, a lot of times that has to do with cost containment for the seller or the developer.
You have to control the pricing too.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it was a delicate dance to start to incorporate some things that were kind of specialized, but not to the degree that it would disable or cripple, the sellers. And we have to remember too, just one thing that sometimes people don't, recognize is the seller in a project like that. I mean, they bought the land 1, 2, 5 years ago, and it might take them that long to actually land a unit, whether it's a house or a condo.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of
Change in the market.
Yeah. And change that over that time, there are changes in the market, and there's some heavy capital in what I call infrastructure, because roads, septic, water, all that has to be put in place for all the units before you even deliver one.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
But nowadays, I think a lot of development, they intend to include the salespeople team, in the early stage. Then they know what's the possibility, there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that goes back to something I think you said earlier, Summer, or came up, and that is, our ability to not predict, because we're not fortune tellers, but have intuition about where the market is going, because of our engagement, and also we're students of the market. I say that quite a bit to folks. Although when I was about 40 or 42, I'll let you in on a secret. I knew everything, or at least I thought I did, and so it's being a student of the market and being willing to say, we're all learning as we go here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened during the gap years between 2004 and 2007 before you become the KW operating partner and after you left Hammond Residential?
So we started, we got to a point, my business partner and I got to a point where we saw a significant change in the market coming. And when I say significant change, really as it relates to the brokerage agencies, we saw a shift with agents in terms of what they wanted and needed. And so we were concerned about where the company was going. And so in 2005, and when you said that in the introduction, I'm thinking, wow, that was 20 years ago. What the heck happened to time? But yeah, we recognized that there was going to be a shift in the way the industry worked. And we said, we really have to be agent-centered. We have to, our real customer or our first customer in a real estate company are the agents. Because if you provide the agents with what they want, need, so that they can serve better the consumers at a higher distinctive level, then you win. And we just didn't see that happening with the company that we were with at the time. And so we left we resigned our positions in December of 2024, December 7th. And, everybody, ourselves included, candidly thought, well, all the folks we're working with now, they'll come with us. Come on, we're going over here. You'll love it. And
you want to be on your own.
2007 was a peak in the market. And what we came to learn, our first lesson as owners is this: the best time to build a company is not in an up market. It's in a recovering market. And so we hit the streets in 2007 thinking, okay, everybody's coming. Hey, well, I'm not
2008.
saying I'm not saying no one came, but it wasn't like we just figured, we'd have 100 people in a week. And I'm going to say this with a little tongue in cheek. And then luckily 2008 occurred. And I say that not that anyone wishes for a significant drop, but 2008 occurred, and it created an environment where agents started to question who they worked for, how it all worked, and so forth. And so we were really able to appeal to a lot of agents. And that year we were able to move over about 80 people from our old company, because they just felt like they weren't in the right environment for their needs. And by the way, that's the current challenge for us every year, because that hasn't changed. Agents are the key to a brokerage's business, and so we constantly look at that, making sure.
So you witnessed 2008.
Oh yeah.
And then now we are, I think we in a recession. I think the last couple of years with everything that's going on, a lot of people have fear and concern about, okay, is it now the good time to buy? Is it like, am I buying too high? Am I buying at the peak? I don't want to buy and lose value in real estate because everybody looking to invest and trying to get some return, right? Understandable. And how do you compare to 2008 and to 2023, 2024 with everything that's going on?
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Great. Well, that's a great question. And I would say my perspective is 2008 was really a significant adjustment. I mean, banks closing, it was just very, very different. That's not to say that this still isn't a challenging market, and we always go through these peaks and valleys. We always do. And so when I look at what's going now, we really have had the fortune of, I'm going to just say it, a soft landing. I mean, I don't think we met the criteria technically of a recession, but we definitely felt it. We definitely felt that it was recession-esque. and still do for that matter. But I think at this point, I think that we have landed fairly softly, and I think that there is going to be, in the next 18 to 24 months, another gradual climb in terms of appreciation. Now, let's keep in mind something that I have to remind myself of, and that is, from 2012, you guys were all alive in 2012, right?
I came to the U.S. in 2008.
Okay. Yeah. So in 2012, we started the real estate started a steady climb of price appreciation from 2012 until 2022. I mean, that was a 10-year climb, year over year, every month, year over year, price appreciation, as well as increased units or increased sales. So we know that just is not a sustainable, you just can't keep that pace forever. There has to be
some adjustment.
Some correction.
At some point, some correction, exactly. And so, what we hope for is when that correction occurs, it's not a
big one.
Big one, exactly. Summer like
surprise
2008, where it felt like the bottom really fell out of the market.
2008 is a bubble, and everybody can finance. I was fresh out of college. Well, sorry, I correct that. I've been working for a couple of years in 2008, maybe 2 years, and I got a financing approved for 10 times of my annual salary. I can buy 10 instead of 5 nowadays. So I think our mortgage companies is more strict than 2008.
Definitely.
And the bubble. I mean, I don't think it will be as worse as.
Did you get to the loan and buy something?
No, I didn't, because I know who I am. So
you regret not buying.
No, I know who I am. I can't afford So even they finance 10 times of my annual income, I just feel like this is not realistic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And Anson, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Go ahead.
Anson, you brought up return on investment and so forth, particularly in real estate. And I say this, and sometimes it's hard for people to hear or wrap their head around, and that is, there are some things that are just a cost. Housing is a cost. Clothes are a cost. Food are costs. And so we don't go to the grocery store and say, what do you want to have for dinner tonight? Chicken, or do you want to maybe get some beef? And we don't say, I don't know, what do you think the return on investment for chicken is versus beef? It's just a cost.
Cost of living.
Yeah. And so what I say to people is, yes, we have benefited by one of our costs, i.e. housing, also provides a mechanism of appreciation where we can get something back from that investment, or that cost. And so that's been a little bit of a factor for us, because now the expectation is, well, I should never buy a home and be in a position and lose money on it. I mean, we have to remember that we're doing that because we want to improve a cost of living in terms of where we live. My wife reminds me of the story where she bought a condo in Boston, her first condo in Boston, and she owned it for 2 years, and she really wanted to be in Boston, really wanted to be on her own, and so she was. And when she sold it, she brought $25,000 to the table. It was a shortfall of $25,000 over 2 years. Okay, but she had the advantage of having it for 2 years.
Absolutely.
And nobody likes to lose on it, but there is a cost for housing. Now, most of us don't have that splendid experience the seller bringing money to the table, but it does and can happen. We just have to remember that however long a period of time that you've been in the home, you had the benefit of living there. Well, yeah, there was also mortgage and other expenses and so forth, but you had, and the alternative is rent. And,
Right.
And, we know what you get when you finish a rental in terms of appreciation or return. There isn't any.
Right.
So, yeah.
So when you became the operating partner at Keller Williams,
Yeah.
you have helped a number of market centers that were struggling and set up a turnaround plan for them. So one of the most important tasks you had was to develop a training programs that helps agents to increase production. And I was certainly a witness of a great training program that KW has. I was with KW for 4.5 years. In particular, for a rookie agent who's looking for a system or program that they can rely on and learn from. How do you see the bad reputations of some buy agents today? Some of the most common complaints are that they don't provide insights, they aren't able to provide useful information, lack of professionalism, encourage buyers to just overbid. Buyers often have bad experience of what we call a one and done experience. And with the new NAR rules, how important you think our industry needs to be refreshed, our image as a realtor? And what are your advices to those who are looking to join real estate and become a realtor?
Can I add one more thing on this question?
Yeah,
sure.
So back then, you probably been through, there was one time in U.S. real estate market, there's no buyer agent. So originally it was seller agent only.
Yeah.
And buyer agent became a thing after certain, lawsuits or complaints so what made buyer agent came back then, and follow that question along, and
Sure.
what's your suggestion?
So that's a real simple combination of question. No, I'll go through it.
Sorry.
So, back in, like I say, just after, the Civil War, we in real estate, back in the old days, everybody worked for the seller. So there was no buyer agency. The agent who listed the property worked for the seller, and the agent who brought buyers, quote, worked for the seller, excuse me. We call that sub-agency. So everybody represented the seller. And you can imagine, just very briefly and very easily, you can imagine that you're working for the seller and you've got the buyer. And back then you had your buyer in your car, again, because internet was not an alternative. So you spend a lot of time with the buyer. I mean, you go, and not that we still don't spend a lot of time with the buyers, but on the front end of the search process, we would drive folks to different places and showings and open houses, and you're spending a lot of time with the buyer. And what happened was, even though you were technically working for the seller, we fell into a relationship with the buyer, and now we start to provide advice and counsel to the buyer. That's where the relationship is. And then someone said, hey, wait a minute, you're supposed to be representing the seller, and so we call that undisclosed buyer agency. And so it really was around that whole thing that started this buyer agency.
It wasn't dual agent at the time.
There was also dual agency, where it was, again, the key word here is, not to get extremely technical, but the key word is undisclosed. So we created agency. We created the relationship, the fiduciary relationship, through our behavior, the way we acted with, what we said, and guidance and so forth, without disclosure. And so that was one of the first lawsuits, national lawsuits, similar to what we've had just recently, that changed the whole buyer agency climate. And so many states then put in legislation around buyer agency and what that meant and what you could and couldn't do. And Also, if you didn't work for the buyer, but also didn't work for the seller, what do we call that, and what can and what you can't do? And that really made a big improvement in the industry. Now, for those of us who were, working and we were accustomed to sub-agency, it was change. And so whenever there's change, whether it's in real estate or any other industry, it creates angst and it creates, agita, if you will. And but it was still for the better. It was better for the consumer because now buyers were actually being represented, and it was disclosed and everybody knew. Well, that went along very well for a long period of time, and then this most recent
Change.
change, again, has to do with what I'm going to call disclosure. And it really focused on a couple things. Number one is the fact that buyers now need to enter into an agreement with an agent if they're going to be represented. And some people might say, well, that's not new. No, that's not new. But what is new is the buyer is responsible for the fee, whatever that may be. And in the old day, or the old days, when we took a listing, the listing company would decide what their fee was, which included a fee to
co-broke.
Exactly, a co-broke fee or cooperating fee.
So before the buyer agent, before invented the buyer agent position.
No. This is after buyer agency is in place. Because back when we all represented the seller, we still got paid by the seller on the buy side.
How much were they paying you back in the day? Was it like also 5%? As a listing agent?
I would say that the trend, now there's nothing that's set, and that's the other thing that has always been a factor of these lawsuits.
It's negotiable.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no
put a
quote,
fixed number,
no quote set fee. It is all negotiable. And so, the trend was more around the lines of 6% back in those days. And who got what, again, was something negotiated and varied. But the point is that it is always negotiable, always has been, always will be. And so now, if we fast forward to this most recent lawsuit change, now we've got a situation where we want to make sure consumers know, number one, all fees are negotiable. There's no state set, any kind of set amount. Now, can companies establish their fee structure or what they want their agents to communicate? Yeah. But it's within a company. It's not within the industry. That's called price fixing. Just like if all the doctors got together and said, hey, we're going to charge, $1,500 for appendectomies from now on. We're all going to agree to that. It's price fixing.
You cannot do that.
Right. So that really is a major pillar on this new thing, and it's really more of a reinforcement of what has been in place or should be in place. And then the other thing, of course, is that when buyers decide to get representation, they have an agreement with an agent, and there's a fee arrangement that they are ultimately responsible for. However, there's a couple of ways that it can work so that the impact to the buyer might be different. And we can talk about some of those things. But the real thing is now we want to make sure that folks know, consumers know, that there is a choice. There's a choice on fee. And what gets offered for a fee to buyer agents will vary, and it's now the seller's election. See, we used to, in the old days, we'd go in and say our fee is X, and so we're going to offer out Y to all the buyer agents, and we're going to keep Z. Now, we When we take a listing, we're just talking about what the listing fee is, and we explain the options that the seller can put in place to offer a buyer agent fee, which includes nothing, by the way. Can include zero.
Yeah. So I noticed that a lot of brokerage right now, they stop co-broke. They just said that no co-broke. So it's like like decided decision made by the seller, like whether to pay the buyer fee. And then sometimes the seller have that like a very, how to say, uncertain. We don't know. Like seller will say like, let's see the offer first.
Right. So you bring up a great point because it demonstrates sort of the options. So what the way we look at this now, the way I see this now is what gets offered by sellers is really going to be market driven. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if there's low inventory, if there's a lot of buyers, if prices are moderate, not climbing at a 7 or 9% annual rate, well, a lot of that creates a lot of advantage for the seller in terms of selling their home. So under those circumstances, there may be less inclination for the seller to offer something. Let's flip the tables. Now because we'll get there. Now we have a market where there's more or a lot of inventory. There are fewer buyers. Maybe prices are moderated flat or low, or I'll even say the words, declining. Well, now it may be in the seller's best interest to offer something to cover buyer agent fees because it's going to increase the activity level and the number of offers that they can select from. So even though we see immediately, as you said, Summer, some or a fair amount or some amount of sellers are not offering anything, it's not written in stone. It's really market influence. It's really going to be influenced by the market.